So I'll endorse Danny's product. I was just downloading it now, but I had an experience this weekend where my buddy James recommended a podcast called The Knowledge Project, and it's got probably one of the best interviews I've ever heard from Naval from AngelList. And like listening to that 2-hour podcast fundamentally changed how I see things that I do on a day-to-day basis. And it was just a sort of chance encounter that I happened to run into James, and he sort of recommended that I check out this like really cool podcast. We were having beers together. I can't have beers with all of my friends at all times, although I would like to try, but that's probably not something that all of us are going to achieve. So I'm really excited you're working on this. This is pretty cool, man. Cool. That didn't really render very as I had hoped, but that's okay. So these are just a couple lessons learned. Can I swear? So I have fucked up a lot. I'm terrible at my job, like probably the worst. I should be fired, but nobody else wants my job, so I still have it. It's pretty cool. So I've done 1.5 podcasts, or 1.5 companies. I swear that was my first beer, no, a second beer. But my background is in sales. I used to help people have nice home-cooked meals. I sold kitchen cabinetry to high-rises, usually 200 or 300 kitchens at a time. I help mines get their fresh start and rape the earth. So with temporary power. Then I moved on to helping people build cool giant ships, which was less interesting, but the ships are really cool. They also have big engines, and I don't know, something in me just really like that. But that's not really why I'm here to talk. What I'm here to talk about, the moral of the story is I've spent my entire life in sales. And about 3 years ago, I ended up reading. 4 years ago, the same guy, James, actually recommended Predictable Revenue. He's like, hey man, we're in Launch Academy. He's like, you got to check this book out. And 3 years later, we ended up merging our companies. But I'm not really here to talk about predictable revenue. I'm here to talk about all the shitty, terrible things that I did at Voltage. And so similar to James, I'm going to talk about happy ears. James from the first one, not James that recommended me the book. But I'm going to talk about happy ears because I had a similar experience. When I first started the customer development process for Voltage, which was a CRM system, unless you couldn't tell, we interviewed about 50 sales leaders. And I think every single one of them, sales leaders, sales people, sales thought leaders, consultants, they said, man, that's a cool idea. That's awesome. Like, you should build this. This is really smart. And we're like, yes, feeling just like James. And we probably we were so excited, we jumped right into like, okay, we're going to skip the whole building an MVP and product market fit and all that stuff. We're just going to start selling this stuff because that's my background, that's my nature. And what happened is we did 50 of these, and only one. When we went back to every customer that we did these development talks with, only one of them actually bought, and that was like a devastating sort of round of showing them the product, being like, look at all this cool stuff, and they're like, no, we wouldn't pay for that. And I was like, but you said it was so cool and so smart. And so I'm going to rip off James here. That's supposed to say happy ears. We did all of these customer development interviews and sort of reflecting on why we screwed the pooch so badly. It was me. I was showing up to these things to validate that I was right, to prove to everybody how smart I was, as opposed to going there looking for, this is what you actually want. Tell me about your pain. Tell me about what you're struggling with. Tell me what your challenges are. Not, hey, does this look cool? Does this look awesome? So that really kind of screwed me a little bit. And to put some context there, I spent 18 months grinding it out at Launch Academy, reffing hockey 5 nights a week to earn $1,000 a month so that I could pay for rent and buy my monthly ration of rum. So that cost me about 18 months. And if I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing because it taught me a lot. But that's just sort of put it in context. Maybe I'm just a slow learner. I'm also not a product manager or an engineer. I'm a sales guy, so a bit slower naturally. The second piece that we really screwed up is we jumped right to selling, right? We look at the two most critical pieces, and they're supposed to be at the bottom. There's this feedback loop where you're supposed to jump and say, like, if I could go back, if I could change one thing, it would be, once I finished that round of 50 and only one person was like, yes, we would buy this, we probably should have gone back to the drawing board and say, okay, well, we fucked up. let's iterate. What did we learn? What did we hear? And continue to iterate there before we start selling, before we rush to, we got to have 10 customers. Because that was our goal. We set, coming out with this brand new product, like we need 10, we need 100 customers. Let's try and ramp this up and scale it up as fast as we can. And ultimately, that was the wrong approach, and we wasted 18 months doing that. So if I could, the next time, if I could go back, as I said, I wouldn't change anything. But the next time I do this and I get feedback like that, I'm going to go through this loop a couple of more times. And I'm really going to niche down on problem solution fit, which is basically a group of the same users, and then product market fit. Are there enough people at similar companies that will actually buy this? Is this going to be a sustainable business for you? The third one, I'm sorry, I screwed up the slides here. But basically, along the journey of building, so our company helps other companies book meetings. We've probably helped 200 or 300 companies build their initial outbound teams so far. Uber was one of them, SAP, Oracle, and Skyrocket, and a few other companies that I may or may not be here tonight. And one of the things that we constantly see with new entrepreneurs is they're rushing to market, just like I was, and then they get that initial foothold in their first market. They're like, great, we've got success here. Let's just copy and paste the sales strategy and the product strategy over here. But that doesn't actually work. You really have to, when you're going into a new market, you almost have to go all the way back to the drawing board and revisit, okay, well, what is the pain uniquely for this industry? It's one thing that we've done a poor job of. It's one thing that we've seen companies as large as, some of the companies I mentioned earlier waste. Well, you can imagine how much money it would cost them to waste 12 months on. So companies, I wasted 18 months on it. Larger companies have wasted even more time and even more resources. So those are sort of the three big things that I've screwed up. So one, be aware of happy ears or confirmation bias. Two is sales is the last step in the customer development or product management startup or product management process. It's not customer development until they've actually closed. That's the point. The point when they give you money is the point where they become a customer. Otherwise, it's just stranger development. And then new markets, just restart the process. Otherwise, you can't just copy and paste. And we have tons of room for questions.
Lots of room. Any questions from this side? No? Oh, yes. Dave, my favorite.
Oh, thank you.
He's a plant.
So you made some mistakes. What's the best thing you did? Oh, I stumped you.
Probably, I cold emailed Aaron. I read Predictable Revenue, and I was like, oh man, this guy, the book fundamentally changed the way I thought about sales. And I was like, the whole book is about cold email. I feel like it'd be rude not to send the guy an email. And so I used his own methodology against him, and then I was his internet stalker for about a year, and finally he's like, just fucking merge with us already? It's really annoying. But that one email started the relationship, stalking, and then the relationship.
Great question. Monica, did you have one? No. Okay. Any other questions from over here? Oh, fantastic. I love the ones that are far back there.
And then you got one way on the other side.
Oh, I do? Okay, cool. Here you go.
So my question is, what was the pain point that you were trying to solve, and how was your approach different from your competitors?
With Voltage? Yeah. So I think the pain point's actually pretty similar to what we're trying to solve now, but much more refined, or it's much more refined now. But basically, if anybody here is old enough to, remember Maximizer or ACT or Goldmine, I'm looking at you, Richard. You'll remember that CRM used to be a sales productivity tool. It would help the salespeople literally be more productive. And 10 years ago, when Salesforce started becoming popular, I'm sure you can imagine, or you can remember what the browser felt like to do work in a browser. Every time you clicked around, it was another mouse click. And the thing that the great power that Salesforce gave everybody was the fact that there's no more shared MySQL databases that people have to try and send around. There's no more VPNing into your Siebel system, right? But so now the sales managers have this great, powerful distributed reporting and dashboarding platform. But when they made that shift, a web browser and this specifically the way they built Salesforce was not built geared towards productivity for salespeople. It was geared towards managers and CEOs getting their dashboards, which I now find exceptionally useful. But we were just frustrated by the fact that it wasn't about the salesperson anymore. It was more work for the salesperson and more value for the upper management.
There was one question over here. Oh, where? Oh, okay.
No, he's not putting his hand up anymore.
No? Oh, no, I need this on recording. Hold your question, please. Thank you.
Thanks. How did you acquire your first client, your first customer?
I was actually in Launch Academy, and I had about, when I was doing Voltage, remember the part that I was terrible at selling and all that stuff? I was hustling like crazy. Monica can attest, because I annoyed everybody in Launch Academy. We were using predictable revenue, and we were booking, I taught an intern how to help me. We were booking 10, 15 meetings for me a week, which drove everybody else who's trying to be productive and focus on actually doing things, drove them crazy. And so I think it was Roger, who's one of the later guys and one of the Launch Academy founders. He made a comment like, I can't wait until you're working on something that you can be successful at. It's like, fuck you, Roger. he was a little more subtle than that, but like not that much more subtle. And so we started just throwing out these ideas with Roger that like, hey, well, he's like, like you're booking a ton of meetings. That's probably super valuable for other companies. I'm like, well, yeah, there's a whole, business around this. He's like, well, why don't you try that? And so we sort of, we started, it was literally just like looking around the Launch Academy and being like, hey, like, do you guys have this problem? We went back into the customer development process, and the difference between Voltage, where everybody's like, yes, this is super smart, and when we were doing the customer development for what we're doing now, is when I sat down with 5 different entrepreneurs to talk about, do a customer development interview, and each one of them was like, I'm going to give you some money, you're going to start working on this in a week. And so I set a goal of, let's find 5 people that will engage in a pilot, and in a week I had 7. And I was like, I can't handle 7. But 2 of the people in the call bullied me into taking on the work. And I was like, well, it's going to suck for me, but, it's money, and I've been making $1,000 a month for the last 18 months. So, yeah, customer development, really, that was the process. And I feel like for Voltage, if we were actually working on something, if we had really distilled our message down and gone back through that loop a couple of times, we probably would have gotten to that state of you're going and you're interviewing people and saying, hey, is this painful? Tell us where it hurts. And then eventually, once you've got the sort of right solution figured out, they're just going to notice and they're going to say, hey, actually, that would really solve this pain. We'll give you some money for that. That was my experience with Carb.
Any other questions? Last question over there. I'm just going to give you the mic. Can you pass it back?
So when you're trying to sell to the business, my experience, you always have to do some customization of your software. Do you have to do that? In case you have to do a lot of customizations, how do you balance the scalability and the customization?
Yeah, when we were working on the CRM system, I think every single deal that we ran into was customization. When we ended up pivoting to what we're doing now, we walked away from probably a couple of 6-figure deals for building custom CRM. At the end of the day, it wasn't that we were adverse to doing services. We actually do services now, and that customer development interview or exercise evolved into a fairly healthy services business that we're now using to sort of build our software product. But at the end of the day, we looked at, is this services work going to forward us towards our goal? Is it going to help us learn? Is it going to give us the experience that we need? And is it going to make us more valuable? Is it going to make our people more valuable? And when we looked at these custom CRM projects, it wasn't going to. When we looked at this services work, yeah, it was going to. So that's why we ended up going this direction. I know I didn't quite answer exactly your question, but we've sort of, along the way, we've had a lot of people ask for, hey, can you do this custom? Can you do that custom? And as long as it's on the roadmap, it's things that we want to build, we'll let them do that. Otherwise, we've basically had to shut them down and tell them no. Otherwise, we'd still be chasing, integrations into the 10,000 CRM systems that are out there.
Thank you so much, Collin. Round of applause.
Thanks, Mindy.